As I mentioned in an earlier video linked to in the description below, I was a really lazy kid. During my childhood, all I wanted to do was play video games and hang out with my friends for my whole life. Now, despite this laziness, I still had many opportunities to do work, though I often did it poorly and half-heartedly. My work experience started when I was 6 years old, when I began regularly helping my friend, without pay, to deliver newspapers. As I also mentioned in an earlier video, starting at around age 8 or 9, my dad overpaid me $1 an hour to do yard work, which I did quite terribly. At age 10, I got my own paper route, so I got to deliver newspapers for about 1 hour each day after school. At age 14, I got a second paper route, so I got to work every day and earn a pretty decent income, at least for my age, until I eventually quit both of my paper routes at age 15. In addition to these paper routes, during my teenage years, I took odd, short-lived jobs in landscaping, construction site cleanup, and even one job bussing tables at a local restaurant. During the summer when I was 16, I got a minimum wage job on a very large construction project where I cleaned up the construction site every day as multiple crews built an apartment complex made up of 25 apartment buildings. This was really hard work. My favorite part was using an electric drill with a wire brush attachment to manually clean hardened concrete off of every individual stair on every staircase in every building across multiple buildings. I also got to use a welder to cut rebar without any eye or face protection, drive a skid steer, and drive a 1-ton truck. It was hard and exhausting work that paid minimum wage. Nevertheless, I was still in the lazy years of my life, so I did every one of these tasks as half-heartedly as possible, and I counted down every minute until quitting time at the end of each day. However, the work was sufficiently demanding physically that even as a teenager, my body throbbed and ached every night as I drifted off to sleep. For my whole childhood, I watched my dad work tirelessly and without complaint to provide for all of us. And I also got to see the examples of my older siblings, especially my oldest sister, whom I watched closely as a kid and who still works about a zillion hours a week as a professional house designer, which she has done now for over 40 years. I am grateful that they both taught me by their examples how to be responsible and how to work hard. For reasons that I can never fully describe, my dad's death dramatically changed my attitude toward work, almost like a switch overnight. 2 months after his passing, and still being just 17 years old, I moved away from home with 3 of my friends to the tourist town of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I worked 2 full-time jobs for the summer. During the day, I cleaned rooms at a hotel. At night, I washed dishes at a local restaurant. I absolutely loved every minute of it. My past resentment and poor attitude toward manual labor disappeared. Work was now a joy, an adventure, and a pleasure. As time passed, I got the opportunity to spend 2 years at my own expense working as a missionary in Peru. This, by the way, is where I gained my love of teaching. One of the many activities we did was a weekly community service project. For one of these that I will never forget, I helped 3 other missionaries move a truckload of sand from the bottom of a hill to the top of a hill. We did this by each filling up a bucket with sand and carrying the bucket on one shoulder and then walking up to the top of the hill over and over and over until we had successfully moved the entire pile of sand from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. Now, during my service years in Peru, I also got to help a local farmer water his crops by carrying buckets of water from a nearby river, which we then poured onto individual plants. We also built small adobe brick houses for local communities, did countless hours of yard work for local schools, and did many other service projects that involved carrying sand, carrying rocks, or carrying water in buckets from one location to another. Now, having now abandoned my childhood laziness, I loved every minute of this as well, and I prided myself in trying to carry more buckets than my fellow missionaries. I did not always win these friendly competitions, but I usually did. However, in my last area of San Vicente de Cañete, I served alongside a young missionary from Idaho who had grown up on a farm, and I could never outwork that guy, no matter how hard I tried. And I did try. Frankly, he worked like an ox. Now, I'm very grateful that my family, and most especially my dad and my oldest sister, taught me by their examples how to work hard. Within days of returning home from Peru, I got an assembly line job for the summer where I was paid to stand in one place for 9 hours a day and bolt an engine down onto a piece of exercise equipment that we were manufacturing. It was hard work, and honestly, it was monotonous work that made me feel dumber at the end of each day. But I'm really glad that I had the experience. So I started going to college at the end of that summer, and my work focus shifted to my studies. The next year, I got my first research job at a small, non-profit biotechnology lab, where I was able to work for the rest of my college years. I was now 22 years old, and this was my first non-manual labor job. I was fully converted. My body no longer throbbed or ached at the end of each day. In fact, I felt like I learned something new every day on this job, which was amazing. I am grateful to my bosses at that company who patiently put up with my initial incompetence and immaturity and mentored me until I eventually became a productive researcher and a valuable contributing team member, even though I probably did not deserve their patience. I got married during my second year of college, and we were expecting our first child about 7 months later. This was another seismic shift in my attitude toward work, because I now knew that my career success was no longer something that just affected me. It was now going to affect my wife and our child, who would be born in just 9 short months. As a result, I increased my work and study hours considerably. After all, the lives of these two people, my wife and my future child, whom I loved more than life itself, was depending on me. Thus, for my last 2 years of college, I almost never slept more than 4 hours a night, except for Sundays. I spent the remaining days waking up at around 3 or 4 every morning, studying for a few hours, and then riding my bicycle to campus where my classes began somewhere between 7 and 8 a.m. Once my classes ended, I would then ride my bike to my job at the biotech nonprofit where I would work until 8 o'clock at night. I then rode my bike back home, around 10 total miles each day, where I studied until about midnight. I then woke up at 3 or 4 the next morning and repeated the process. I combated my sleep deprivation by drinking excessive amounts of Diet Mountain Dew. As a result, I now despise that drink because I associate it with some of my most exhausting experiences. After finishing my chemistry bachelor's degree, I immediately went on to grad school, naively hoping that I would not have to study or work for as many hours. I was massively wrong. I worked countless hours, often 18-hour days, in order to meet all of the expectations of teaching, research, grant, and publication writing. In fact, I once went 52 hours straight without sleep, during which I worked all of those hours but 4. Now, I did not sleep during the 4-hour break, but instead just came home to quickly eat dinner and then accompany my Boy Scout troop, yes, I was a scout leader at the time, to an activity that we had planned. I then returned back to work and kept working for another 18 hours. This amounted to 52 hours without sleep, but not without imbibing massive quantities of vile, vomit-inducing Diet Mountain Dew. My work intensity has continued ever since, carrying me through 5.5 years of grad school, 16 months as a postdoctoral research fellow, and now 9 years as a university professor. Workaholism is both a strength and a weakness. For example, a few years back during a dinner with my family, my wife noticed that I was not engaged in a family conversation. She looked at me from across the table and said, "Mike, you're thinking about work, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. Now, I'm not endorsing or recommending that any of you follow my example of sleep deprivation. I do not want any of you to harm your health. I do, however, want to tell you that if you are able to develop a strong work ethic, it will bless you. And I firmly believe that all honest work is deserving of respect. I am deeply grateful for the work examples of my many siblings, siblings-in-law, and parents-in-law, who include 2 public school teachers, an accountant, 2 general contractors, a mechanical/electrical engineer, 1 person in sales, my mother-in-law who works at a mail sorting facility, my sister who designs homes, my brother who's a truck driver, my other brother who's a software engineer, and 10 women who include my mom, my mother-in-law, my sisters and sisters-in-law, and my wife, who are all astonishingly amazing and dedicated mothers. And I haven't even started talking about my many adult nieces and nephews and their spouses and all of the work that they do. I love you all. Thank you all for your priceless examples of responsibility, hard work, and dedication, and most especially for being great parents to your kids. Thank you for teaching me by what you do every day how to love work and your families. And to everyone else who's watching this, please feel free to comment below and share your own personal experiences on learning how to do and how to enjoy work. I know that work can be frustrating and tiring at times. Like a roller coaster, it has its ups and downs. But I promise that the feelings of personal satisfaction and joy that can come from a lifetime of honest, dedicated work are priceless. Thanks again for watching. Please have an enjoyable rest of your day.